On today's episode, we'll be talking about the Houston Rockets. The Houston Rockets were coming off a 52-30 record in 2024-25. They ended up finishing second in the West, but lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Warriors. It was a true breakout year for this young team, and they took that mindset into the offseason. They ended up extending Steven Adams and Jabari Smith Jr., re-signed Fred VanVleet, Aaron Holiday, Jeff Green, as well as Jae'Sean Tate. They didn't bring in any young draft picks after trading away the first round pick in the Kevin Durant deal, but they did bring in Clint Capella via trade, Dorian Finney-Smith as a free agent, and Josh Okogie as a free agent. As for the losses, they ended up trading away Dillon Brooks and Jalen Green in that KD deal as well, waived Jock Landale, and traded Cam Whitmore to the Wizards. After acquiring Kevin Durant, this team was seen as one of the league's premier contenders and were looking to build on the promising jump from last season. A lot of high expectations for this team as they were coming in number 7 in the power rankings. The Rockets ended up going 17-8 in the first 25 games, were definitely living up to expectations, and it was headlined by the play of Alperen Sengun and Kevin Durant. Alperen came out the gates hot, playing extremely well, and Kevin Durant was just doing the typical Kevin Durant things. One of the greatest scorers to ever play the game, does everything he needs to on the floor, and makes it look effortless. But as everyone knows, they were coming into the year with Fred VanVleet going to miss the entire year with a torn ACL, and the absence of him created a point guard by committee approach, but it was mostly ran by Amen Thompson, and to be completely honest, he struggled. He was playing out of position and wasn't able to play to his strengths. That was probably the most notable thing from the start of their season. However, to talk more about that point guard by committee, we did get to see some Reed Sheppard action right from the start. He showcased his ability to score the ball, but was extremely streaky. He had a few great games, but not enough to warrant him getting full-time starter minutes with how poor he was on the defensive side of the ball, especially on a very defensive-minded team with Ime Udoka as the head coach. Outside of KD, their biggest acquisition of the offseason was Dorian Finney-Smith when they brought him in on that contract, but we didn't end up seeing him until Christmas. I think disappointing is the best way to describe how his time with the Rockets has gone so far. In another lineup, came into the year injured, and when he came back, just did not look like the same player that they spent all that money on. But on the bright side, we really saw a jump from the young guys, Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason, who have really carved out a role for themselves in this team. Jabari has quickly become a very valuable piece for this Rockets team with his ability to be a legit 3-and-D player, shooting close to 40% from 3 at 6'11". He had himself a career year this year. The Rockets were looking like a team that was honestly firing on all cylinders, they were meshing well, and it wasn't until January 18th when the Rockets' concerns really started to become prevalent. Steven Adams went down with a season-ending injury, and the Rockets lost a huge piece of their defense and offensive rebounding. It was from this moment on where the Rockets did not look like the same team at all. Yes, they were still winning games, but there was a clear hole in their ability to have a defensive presence in the paint, as that's what Steven Adams was doing. He was holding on the paint, he was getting offensive rebounds, allowing them to get second chance opportunities, as well as stopping players down low. And that's not to mention his incredible ability to be a screen setter. It's like running into a brick wall when he comes up and sets those screens. The Rockets ended up going into the deadline at 31-19, sitting in the top half of the Western Conference, and there was some expectation that the Rockets were going to go after one of those point guards that became available, like an Ayo Dosunmu or a Kobe White, to fill that void that they had at that position. But they ended up doing nothing. I think this was a mistake on their end. There were players available to help them fill that void, move Amen back to more of a natural position, let him play to his strengths, bring in a guy, like I said, like Ayo or Kobe White, who could be a facilitator and just overall be a ball handler, to a more natural position for those guys. So doing nothing was definitely not the right approach there. Luckily for them though, Amen Thompson really started to figure it out in the second half of the season. Offensively, that is. The defense was always there, and it allowed the team to be more comfortable with their decision to not make a move at the deadline, but there was still some glaring discrepancy and holes that should have been addressed. Shortly after the deadline, GM Raphael Stone came out and made this quote: "So we weren't looking to make a change for change's sake at all. Given the number of injuries we've taken, one thing we did look at was this just not our year? Because we do feel, leading into today, we've had some of the worst injury luck in the NBA." That's not exactly what you want to hear from your GM, especially as a fan. This team went all in during the offseason to convince everyone they're ready for a championship, and now the GM's going to come out and say, maybe this isn't our year. You can't just throw away a year, especially at the deadline. This team was still winning games. The team still had the potential to compete, but according to the GM, it just wasn't their year. I know he got a lot of backlash for this, and it got talked about everywhere. I just don't think it was the best thing for him to say, especially at that time. The rest of the year was honestly a mess. Yes, they won games and ended up going 52-30 once again, as well as made the playoffs, but there was a clear disconnect between Ime Udoka and the team. There was also the KD burner allegation during All-Star Weekend. That was hilarious. But it just seemed that whatever was going on in Houston was not good, and it seemed toxic, and the overall environment just was not something that was what a championship caliber team should be having going on. One positive note for the second half of the season is after being in the lineup for the start of the year, Tari Eason stayed healthy down the stretch of the second half and provided great impact alongside the high-level performances of KD, Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., and then Reed Sheppard also showed some more offensive consistency, earning himself way more minutes and even starting nods at times. Those were really the only two positive things down the second half of the season. As I mentioned, it was honestly a mess, but they did end up going 52-30. This locked them up in the 5th seed going into the playoffs, and they got matched up against a depleted Lakers team in round 1. Everyone had the Rockets picked as the favorite because of the injuries on this Lakers team, but they lost in 6 games. It was an abysmal performance from this team, and their lack of shooting and paint defense was exposed. They were the favorites going in, and by the end of it, they just looked lost, and it did not help that KD was only available for one of these games. But I think this summed up their season perfectly. It was a good season record-wise, but a disappointing one when you factor in the product and the expectations that they had. As we look ahead, there's a lot of stuff that's been talked about for the Rockets offseason. The Rockets have officially shifted from rebuilding into contending. They accelerated their timeline by trading for Kevin Durant and surrounding its young core with veteran talent, signaling that championship contention, not development, is now the expectation. Like I did talk about previously, injuries did derail this plan. Fred VanVleet suffered the ACL tear before the season, Steven Adams went down with the season-ending ankle surgery, and Durant was limited to just one playoff game, preventing Houston from seeing its intended roster at full strength. These injuries exposed major hole in the roster at point guard and subpar rebounding. I cannot emphasize that enough. Those are the 2 biggest holes of this roster, and it wasn't even like they could even try to hide it during the season. It got exposed almost all year long. More specifically, when Steven Adams went down, but it got exposed night in and night out. But on a more positive note, the young core did prove that they belong. The young lineup of Reed Sheppard, Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, and Jabari Smith Jr., as well as Alperen Sengun, posted excellent numbers during the playoffs and showed Houston may already have a strong foundation for the future, solidifying the idea that this team is very close to being considered a real contender. However, Houston has no first-round picks this year to bring in more young talent. This is due to trades that they've made in the past, but they do have the Brooklyn Nets pick in next year's draft, so that's something very valuable that they have to use even as a trade asset if they want to. I think the most immediate thing that kind of got talked about when they got eliminated was Ime Udoka's future. I know Raphael Stone came out and said he's not going anywhere, but it's definitely something that should be evaluated. Houston won 52 games for a second straight season, but his struggles in the clutch situations and first round exit may force management to determine whether Udoka is the coach that can lead this team to a championship contention. I know he led Boston there before he had the scandal, got fired, so it's definitely something he can do. It would be a surprising move if they choose to fire him, but there's been lots of discussion about what his future looks like in Houston, as it was reported that he had lost the locker room, butting heads with major pieces of the roster, especially Alperen Sengun, those who did not look like they were on the same page ever. Outside of that, though, their biggest priority this offseason is getting Fred VanVleet healthy. Houston's offense declined significantly without VanVleet, and the stats showed even last year when he was out, and then this year we saw that him being out was a huge hole in the roster. His return could provide the organization with playmaking, leadership, and late-game execution that it lacked throughout the entire season. Some of that was age, some of that was coaching. He's just a guy that can come and provide that, and he's shown that in his whole career. They definitely are looking forward to having him back next year. A key decision for them to make is how they handle Tari Eason's restricted free agency. Eason showed flashes of becoming an elite two-way wing before his production dipped late in the season. Funny enough, his production dipped when he was becoming more consistent in the lineup, not being in and out with injury. But Houston must determine his long-term value and what price they're willing to pay to keep him. He's definitely going to get some buzz around the league when free agency opens. Houston may have to overpay if they want to have a chance at keeping him around. There's going to be teams like the Bulls that are going to just throw offers at him because they have money. They're going to have to come to terms with themselves and what they want to do with their money. Maybe throwing a little bit more at him to have him around because he kind of fits the culture there. I think it'd be a good decision to keep him around, but it might be harder than they think. As for an extension candidate, Amen Thompson is due for a major extension. He took a significant leap this season once he got comfortable in that point guard position, averaged career highs across the board, and emerged as one of the league's most versatile young players, him and his brother. Amen Thompson's a little bit more offensive upside. Asar has a little bit more defensive upside, but Amen is definitely super versatile and probably one of the best young players to have on your team right now. A long-term extension appears likely and should be something they look to take care of sooner rather than later. Wouldn't be surprised if they get it done this offseason or as soon as he's eligible. Something that I don't understand is that Houston still has financial flexibility. Despite the Durant and Jabari Smith Jr. extensions, the Rockets remain below the luxury tax and the first apron, giving them room to improve the roster while retaining key players. They brought in Dorian Finney-Smith last year, and it just seemed like they were printing money in their front office. I don't know how they kept getting money to bring these guys in, but somehow they're still financially flexible, and that's a big asset for them going into the offseason. The definite biggest need for them is improved offensive spacing. Houston's young core remain heavily reliant on scoring in the paint, so continued shooting development from Amen Thompson, Reed Sheppard, and Alperen Sengun at the 5, plus the addition of a reliable 3-and-D wing, because Dorian Finney-Smith did not provide that at all, and a backup point guard are among the team's biggest priorities when they go into the open market. But the idea of scratching free agency as a whole is also one that came up because Houston's been brought up in many deals that involve a number of stars like Giannis Antetokounmpo and Jaylen Brown. A big move could be on the horizon for this team as they have several valuable young players as well as a number of picks to attach in a trade for one of the All-Stars that could become available. A move like this would put them comfortably into discussions as one of the league's best teams. The Rockets remain one of the NBA's most intriguing teams, balancing a win-now roster built around Kevin Durant with a rapidly improving young core, while offseason decisions on Ime Udoka, Tari Eason, and the team's long-term direction could shape the next phase of the Houston Rockets championship pursuit.